Story 1. I took an afternoon nap at the old library. I regret what I woke up to. I've always loved the quiet of libraries. The way the air seemed to hum with a subdued reverence, how the dusty scent of old books wrapped around me like a comforting embrace. I used to hang out at my grandma's house when she was still alive and kicking. The place was a bit dusty, though Nana did try her best at dusting, and the old wooden furniture made the air smell ancient, as it should. Surely, you know how the scent of your grandparents' house is, right? It was why I took the job at the city's oldest library. I grew up in that kind of rustic environment. I thought it would be the perfect place to escape, to lose myself in the endless stacks of long-forgotten stories. But I never imagined I would stumble upon one of my own. It started with a simple accident. I was restocking the history section when my foot caught on something. Looking down, I saw the corner of an old, leather-bound book peeking out from beneath a shelf. It was strange. This particular shelf was bolted to the floor, leaving no room for anything to slip underneath. Curious, I knelt and pulled the book free, the spine creaking with age. The title was embossed in gold, though the letters were faded and nearly illegible. It took a moment for me to decipher them: The Library of Echoes. I had never seen or heard of it before, which was odd given how well I knew the books that should be in this particular shelf. I turned it over, searching for a barcode or any sign it belonged to our library. There was none. Someone might have accidentally put this back, I thought to myself. Thus, I reported this for our manager to look into via our library system. Finished filing out the report, my curiosity got the better of me. A book as old as it looked will definitely contain some sort of vintage novel that would intrigue a geeky bookworm such as me. I giddily took the book to the back room, where I could examine it without interruption. The pages were brittle, yellowed with age, but the text was clear, crisp even, as though the ink had just dried. As I read the first few lines, a strange sensation came over me. The words were familiar, unsettlingly so. The book described a librarian, alone in a vast, ancient library, discovering a hidden book that seemed to have been waiting for them. My hands began to tremble as I continued reading, realizing that the book was describing me, right down to the smallest details of my day. The chair I was sitting in, the coffee I had spilled earlier in the break room, even the way my heart was beginning to race as I read further. I should have stopped, but I couldn't. The story continued, recounting how the librarian, overwhelmed by the impossible nature of the book, would return to the shelves in search of more. How they would find a hidden door, one they had never noticed before, leading to a forgotten section of the library. A place that shouldn't exist. I shut the book. Well, that was weird. I thought to myself after a good yawn. The kind of yawn that shuts you out from the world for a few seconds. As I'm the only person in this library on a Sunday and had a filling lunch earlier, I decided to take a nap. I made sure to look like I was reading a book, a skill I developed in middle school. I remembering falling asleep quickly. In the dream, I felt sudden terror as I saw myself in the middle of the same library. I don't remember standing up and walking away from my desk. Driven by a mix of fear and compulsion, I walked through the labyrinth of shelves until I saw it, the small, narrow door at the end of an aisle I knew had been empty, just waiting to be found as said in the book. The wood was ancient, the paint peeling, yet it called to me, pulling me forward with an irresistible force. I grasped the cold, brass handle and pushed it open. The air beyond was different, colder, heavier, thick with the scent of mildew and something else, something I couldn't quite place. The room was dimly lit by a single flickering bulb hanging from the ceiling, casting long, shifting shadows across the walls. Shelves lined the room, filled with more books, each one seemingly older than the last. I picked up the first book that caught my eye. It was thick, bound in cracked leather, and as I opened it, I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. The words were in a language I couldn't understand, the letters twisting and contorting on the page as if they were alive. Then suddenly the book's cover became as hot as the sun. I screamed in pain as I dropped the book, my charred hands shaking uncontrollably. But it was too late. The door behind me slammed shut, the echo reverberating through the room like a gunshot. I was trapped. Panic set in, but my body refused to move, held in place by some unseen force. The books on the shelves began to hum, a low, guttural sound that resonated deep within my bones. I realized then that the room itself was alive. The books were its organs, the shelves its bones, and I was its prey. In the center of the room stood a pedestal, and on it rested another book, identical to the one I had first found. My feet moved of their own accord, carrying me toward it as the humming grew louder, more insistent. I didn't want to open it, but my hands betrayed me, reaching out to touch the worn cover. The moment my fingers brushed the leather, the humming stopped. Silence fell over the room like a shroud. I opened the book. It was blank. I flipped through the pages, each one as empty as the last, until I reached the very end. There, in spidery handwriting, was a single sentence. "You are the last echo." I felt a sharp pain in my chest, as if something had torn loose inside me. The room began to spin, the shadows closing in, pressing against me until I could barely breathe. And then, as quickly as it had begun, it stopped. I was standing in the main hall of the library, the hidden door nowhere to be seen. The book was gone, vanished from my hands. But I wasn't alone. People were moving through the aisles, but they didn't see me. I tried to speak, to call out, but no sound came. It was as if I didn't exist. I rushed to the nearest patron, waving my hands in front of their face, but they walked right through me as if I were a ghost. In a way, I suppose I was. As I stood there, helpless, I heard it, the humming. It was faint at first, barely audible over the sounds of the library, but it grew louder, clearer, until I could make out the words. "You are the last echo." The truth hit me with a cold, sinking dread. I wasn't just in the library, I was part of it now, another echo in its endless, twisting halls. My story, my life, had been absorbed, just like all the others who had come before me. And the library would continue to grow, to feed on the souls of those who wandered too far into its depths. I tried to leave, to escape, but no matter how far I ran, how many doors I opened, I always ended up back in that same room, with its flickering light and endless shelves. The books, now filled with my words, my thoughts, mocked me from their places on the shelves. And every time I opened one, I found the same sentence staring back at me. "You are the last echo." The moment I was about to read those exact words for the last time, a voice read it for me. It didn't sound human at all. It sounded like it was read in an infinitely large room, resonating every word. It was deafening. I felt my eardrums disintegrate. I could feel blood gush out my ears down to my neck. This was the worst pain I've felt in my entire life, might even be the worst thing a human could feel before dying. I would never wish this excruciating pain upon no one. Before I could feel the thick crimson blood drip down my chest, I woke up. I woke up with a start, my heart racing as the oppressive darkness of the library faded away. I was still in my chair, surrounded by stacks of old dusty books, my drool pooling in one area of my desk, the late afternoon light streaming through the tall windows. I let out a shaky sigh, relieved that it had all just been a daydream, a twisted product of my overactive imagination. I glanced at the clock on the wall, noting that only a few minutes had passed since I had dozed off. I chuckled nervously at myself, rubbing my temples to dispel the lingering unease. The Library of Echoes wasn't real. It couldn't be. Just a product of my mind blending the musty atmosphere of this ancient building with the unsettling stories I'd been cataloging all day. But as I stood up to leave, something caught my eye. A book that I didn't remember pulling from the shelf sat open on the desk in front of me. The pages were filled with names, hundreds of them, written in an elegant, flowing script. I skimmed the list, my eyes widening as I saw the last name written at the bottom. It was mine. My breath hitched, and I quickly slammed the book shut, my hands trembling. I forced a mocking laugh, trying to convince myself it was just another part of the dream that had bled into reality. "Fuck you, library, fuck you," I muttered as I laughed, trying to make light of the situation. But as I turned to leave the library, the shadows seemed to grow longer, the air colder, and I swear I heard faint whispers echoing through the aisles. "You are the last echo." I hurried out, my footsteps echoing unnaturally loud in the empty space. As I reached the door, I glanced back one last time. Everything seemed normal, just an old library filled with dusty books. But as I stepped outside into the fading daylight, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, something that had followed me out of the dream and into the waking world. And when I looked at the windows, I could have sworn I saw a faint reflection of someone, or something, standing where I had just been. Story 2. I think my neighbor is lurking on me. I live in a small town in the forests of New York State, close to Pennsylvania. The house I live in is a 2-story wooden house, a bit big for just me, but I like living in the countryside. The house is pretty old, and I always have something to do. There is always something to fix. It keeps me occupied, and it makes me happy. So, the other day I was doing some work in my basement when I got a text message. "Hey, can I borrow your ladder for a couple of days? Bob." Bob is my neighbor. He's in his 60s, short and muscular. He's always up to something, and the other day he mentioned a leak on his roof. Bob and I are good neighbors. We help each other with projects, drink beer, and occasionally go hunting. I thought about the text message. It came from a number I didn't recognize. Bob had given me his number as soon as I moved in. He said that it's always good to keep in touch with your neighbors, in case anything happens. I thought no more about it and just assumed he'd gotten a new phone number. So I replied, "Sure. Do you want me to come over with it?" I looked at my phone, waiting for an answer, but no answer came. So, I resumed my work. After a while, I got another text. "Can you leave it outside? To know when I'm home. Thanks." Weird, I thought, but Bob isn't your average neighbor. He's always been a bit strange. So, without further thoughts, I left it outside. Where we live, we can leave things unattended without them being stolen. The day continued as usual until bedtime. My bedroom is on the second flood, with a large window and a balcony outside. I see that Bob's truck is still not home before I close the curtains. When going to bed, I always leave them a bit apart and the window a bit open, so that fresh air can flow through during the night. I awoke to the sound of the curtains opening and saw a dark figure peeking at me. Then, I saw a flash, like the one your phone makes when you take a picture. I was dazzled and saw nothing, but I could hear the ladder being moved away. When I regained my vision, the figure was missing, and so was my ladder. I stood at my window watching out. Bob's truck was still missing. His house was dark, not even a porch light was lit. My heart raced. What had just happened? I rushed to the window and closed it fully. I closed the curtains and threw on some clothes. It was still in the middle of the night, and the thought of what just happened made me terrified, so I called the cops. The cops showed up after an hour or so. I saw the car from my windows, and I walked down to meet them at the porch. I told them what had happened, how I had gotten the text message and left my ladder outside, the flash I saw and the dark figure. We walked around the house to see if there had been any attempts of breaking in, or any damage done. We saw nothing. The cops walked over to Bob's house and knocked, but no answer. They told me there wasn't anything else they could do, but would get back to me when they had talked to Bob. When they had left, I locked my door and sat down on my couch, watching TV. I awoke later, and saw that it was midday. The shock from earlier had settled, and my fear had been replaced with anger. I walked up to Bob's house and knocked on the door. No answer. I took a stroll around the house to see if anything was weird. Apart from every light being turned off, there wasn't anything to remark. Bob's truck was still missing, but maybe he'd gotten a ride home? I thought. When I walked back to my house, I got the urge to check around my house, hoping to find something. Under my balcony, I found holes in the grass, probably from where the ladder had stood. The thought of Bob lurking on me made me to shiver. How can someone I've known for so long do this to me? Then another thought struck me and my heart almost skipped a beat. What if it wasn't Bob who had texted me, and instead it was someone else? I continued to walk around my house, looking for more holes, but couldn't find any. Bob, or whoever lurking on me, had only placed the ladder against the balcony. The balcony. The figure had stood on my balcony. My heart raced and I began to cold sweat. I had never had any troubles out here, and I've lived here for 10 years. How would I sleep now, knowing that someone was after me? I didn't want to call anyone and worry them, especially when they're far away. My brothers live in the South and my parents had moved to California. I thought about calling some friends and asking if I could crash on their couch for a day or two, but now I wanted to get away, right now. I got in my truck and started to drive. After an hour of driving, my nerves were a bit calmer, but I didn't want to sleep at home. Not for tonight. I stopped at a nearby motel and checked in. One night away couldn't hurt. The feeling of being away made me feel safer, and I slept like a log. A good night of sleep had calmed me and made me reevaluate the situation. Could it have been a nightmare? I remember the flash clearly, but there weren't any more things to remark. Apart from the holes in the ground. Could I have done them myself? I got in my truck and drove back home. When I came home, Bob's house was suspiciously dark, and his truck still missing. Before I opened the door, I felt that I wanted to check around the house. I'm glad that I did, but wish that I hadn't. Under every window were the type of holes I had seen under the balcony. They hadn't been there before. I rushed to my truck and drove away as fast as I could. I called my brother to inform him that I was on my way to him. There's over 700 miles to my closest brother, but the thought of someone making that many attempts to spy on me almost made me nauseous. When I was midway, I stopped for some food. I pulled up on a diner and sat down. My brother called to see how I was doing, and when I thought I'd arrive. On my way back to the truck, my phone rang. It was Bob, and the display showed his old number, the one he gave to me ages ago. I answered. Hello? Hey man, how are you doing? Why do you need to borrow my ladder? I thought you had your own. I froze and couldn't move. I wanted to scream, I wanted to cry, I wanted to tell Bob to get out quickly, and to get far away. Nothing. I couldn't move my lips, not a single word came from my mouth. A single was the only sound I could make. Anyway, I left it outside as you wanted. Will you be home soon? Been a while now that I've been away. We need to watch the game and drink a few beers together. I couldn't respond, I didn't know what to say. Again, I made the sound. Bad reception? Well, talk to you later then, take care. The call ended. What did I just do? Why didn't I try to warn him? I sat down in my truck. The rearview mirror reflected my face, I was pale as a sheet. I felt a lot of things, yet I couldn't feel anything. I just drove off, and drove till I came to my brother's house. When I arrived, it was late, and my brother greeted me with some food. I told him what had happened, everything except my conversation with Bob. I was ashamed that I hadn't said anything. After dinner, I went to sleep on the couch. As I closed my eyes, ready to sleep, I heard my phone get a text message. A chill went down my spine. The message was from yet another number. I opened the phone, I saw that the message was just a picture. A picture taken through a window, with bad lighting and the flash reflecting from what seemed to be part of a window, as if the picture was taken from outside. There was something else on the picture, a bed, and a man sleeping in it. Story 3. People in my town started to disappear. We called it the slow rapture. It started with Eddie Martin. 1 second, he was at Garvey's General, shooting the shit with the cashier. The next, he was gone. A whip crack-like noise signaled his departure, air rushing into a space that was previously occupied by a man. The glass bottle of cherry soda he was holding fell to the floor and smashed. The cashier looked dumbfounded. He ran through the store, seeing if anyone else was around to confirm what he had just witnessed. We all called him crazy at first. People don't just vanish into thin air. Wasn't till Garvey pulled up the CCTV records that we started to believe it. One frame, there. The next, gone. Drink all over the floor. Most still thought it was fake, some dumb joke the 3 men weren't on. Lots of stuff could be done with computers nowadays, faking a video was easy. Garvey insisted he had nothing to do with it though. Whatever this was, it was all Eddie. He was probably just hiding out somewhere laughing at all of us, Garvey had said. Then a day passed. And then two. Long time to hide for a prank. The third day was when people really started getting worried. An SUV drove through a red light on Main Street. Went right through and into a pole. The driver's side seat was destroyed, would have probably killed the driver if there had been one. The car, however, was empty. Sheriff Lowery found the registration in the glove compartment. Melissa Gore, a teacher at the elementary school, was the owner and the second person to vanish. The sheriff's department searched the area for about an hour before shrugging their shoulders and towing the car to the impound lot. An hour after that, the mayor was on the radio announcing a town meeting to be held that night. Word spread quickly of both the second disappearance and of the meeting. Whispers spread around town. Eddie could be explained away as a dumb joke. He'd show up eventually, right? It helped that he didn't have anyone to worry about him. He had a couple friends in town, but that was it, mostly kept to himself. Melissa was a different story. All the kids she taught, a husband, some family in town, people would be looking for her. People would want to know what happened. The meeting was a shit show, televised live on local channels for the viewing pleasure of those who couldn't make it. The mayor and sheriff walked out to a crowd that was yelling about 50 different theories for what the hell took those people. Attempts to quell the crowd were futile until Sheriff Lowery cupped his hands to his face and boomed a quiet. The mayor, Mr. Reeds, was at the microphone now and started. He stammered and sputtered about how our small town didn't have the tools required to investigate these matters fully and how he was calling in the big guns to help find these people. Half the room erupted into curses and boos when he clarified that said big guns were the United States government. He had said he contacted state police at first and it got escalated surprisingly fast. No one wanted government types poking their noses in our business, but calmer heads recognized the necessary evil. We wanted our folks to be found, after all. A quick thank you goodbye and Mayor Reeds was off the stage, along with the sheriff. It would be a long time till we would all head back to our homes, however. 20 different conversations erupted. An angry male voice was one of the easier ones to hear. "Why the hell are we letting the government come help?" he said. "They caused all this. Teleportation experiment, got to be. Just like that Philadelphia thing." "Shut up, Jimmy," a different voice retorted. "It's aliens. Gotta be aliens. I saw a UFO the other week when walking my dog. Long, transparent thing with fins." And the two began to fight, calling each other all sorts of things that all boiled down to crazy or stupid. In the back, a small group had begun to form around Paul Baker. He worked at the library, going through historical accounts, and folklore was his hobby. "The land's no good," he said, shaking his head. "The hell's that mean?" a voice from the crowd around him asked. "Bad land. Bad things happen. When the European settlers came, they found this area completely unoccupied. Big grassy open area next to a forest with a stream in it, perfect for a community. Why wasn't it being used? Remember when those kids from Gridham came down that one summer? They were anthropology students. They said it was remarkable how empty the land was. No traces of native cultures at all, no arrowheads, no burial sites, hell, no pottery shards. The land was empty for a reason. It had to be." His crowd began to murmur at that. Another group was forming on the other side of the room, this one headed by a handful of people. An older woman was talking the most, and the loudest. She was Patricia Hornley, a PTA mom who stayed in it long after her daughter had finished school. She had a few of her other PTA members around her, and they were providing their own theory. "Does this not fall in line with the description of the rapture?" she preached. "We assumed we would all get taken at once, but the Lord works in mysterious ways. Mrs. Gore was an angel to her students, and she has been taken up into the kingdom of heaven. I embrace this slow rapture, and I am happy for those that are taken. I pray my turn comes soon." Her crowd had a lot of the churchgoers in it. They were all nodding with her, clapping in the pauses. I guessed it was comforting to them. I didn't stay long after that. Paul Baker had left that night. He went straight home, packed up, and was out to his car in about 30 minutes. His neighbors asked where he was gonna go, what he was gonna do. Up north, Jersey, he replied. I got family up there, I'll get a job there. And he was gone. Guess he spooked himself with Badland talk. He was leaving lots behind. Mayor Reed's big guns came in the morning. We had gathered near Garvey's General. We had all agreed last night that it would be a good idea to make sure no one vanished overnight. Families and couples sent one member each if they didn't all come. We had just finished confirming that we didn't lose anyone to the slow rapture. It was a good name. I had to give Patricia that, when we heard the roaring of many engines. We watched as big, dark green trucks drove into our small town. There were 5 of them, all the same bulky SUV. Each had a decal on the driver door, a seal for some kind of government department. It showed a woman with a sword in one hand and a struggling snake in the other. Yellow words circled the seal and read, Bureau of Interior Management. BIM. The convoy came to a stop at the store. We watched from the parking lot as the door of the middle car swung open. A large man hopped out and in the same swift motion closed the door behind him. He was dressed in a black jumpsuit covered with pouches and belts. The same seal from the car door was embroidered on the back. He walked up to us, smiling, and asked us where Mayor Reed's might be. Someone pointed him out and the man thanked us. Mayor Reed's, Sheriff Lowry, and the man in the black jumpsuit stepped to the side and started talking. We all tried to listen in, and bits and pieces came through. Just what the hell is the Bureau of Interior Management? Mayor Reed's asked. I thought we'd get the FBI or something. The man in the black jumpsuit, still grinning, put a large hand on the mayor's shoulder and replied. He spoke in a quieter voice than Reed's did. We couldn't hear a thing. He turned to the sheriff and said something. Listen, pal, Lowry began. I was under the impression this was going to be a joint effort. Where I come from, that means work together, not I'm king of the playground. Listen to me. The man in the black jumpsuit spoke louder in his reply this time, glancing at us. He was making sure we could hear this part. Your impression was wrong. As of 5 hours ago, in fact, complete control over this investigation has been passed over to me. Any interference in my investigation and I will send you all the way to fucking Attica. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Do you understand me? His eyes wandered to our group at the end. That goes for all of you too, they said. Lowry stammered, 5 different words trying to come out while Reeds just looked at the asphalt like a scolded child. Good. The man in the black jumpsuit practically spun on his heels to face the crowd. Any motels in this little town? A man raised his hand. He wore a baseball cap and had a beer gut. We got one. I own it. It's just down the road a little ways. Great. Me and my boys are gonna borrow it for a few days while we investigate this little issue your town's got. You don't mind, do ya? The same shit-eating grin was on his face. Well, I don't know. I mean... Oh. Wait a minute. The large man held up a finger and dug into a pouch around his hip with his other hand. He pulled out an envelope. Reaching in, he produced a wad of bills that looked like they had just gotten out of the mint that day. Not a wrinkle in sight. This should cover it. He handed the motel owner the wad of bills. He turned again to face his convoy of cars. The man performed a hand motion, reached over to the walkie-talkie on his shoulder, and whispered a few words into it. The convoy began moving towards the direction of the motel. The man in the black jumpsuit walked back over to the sheriff and mayor. Now, he said, putting an arm on each of their shoulders, where can I find the car that nice woman disappeared in? Underscore, 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 underscore. The BIM guys had become a part of our town for the next few days. We got used to seeing them, walking in pairs, holding machines in their hands they would use to gather reading or something like that. Their uniform was very similar to the large man's, the only difference was that theirs was green. Black jumpsuit, he hadn't given his name, said that we should continue the morning headcount meetings. A man from the bureau would join us there now, and if anyone was missing he would call it in and they would send men to the scene to check. That's what happened when Mayor Reeds didn't show up to one of the head counts. The man in the green jumpsuit talked into his shoulder radio when we did the count. Then he was in his car and driving to Mayor Reeds's house. The rest of us looked at each other. We followed. What else were we to do? False alarm. One of the men in green was saying as I pulled up. They were packing their gear back up into their trucks. He's not gone? I asked. Oh, he's gone, the man replied, only not like the other two. He skipped town. His car's missing. Wallet probably too. Reeds was probably smart for that. Smarter than me. I don't know why I stayed. I thought about that on the drive back to my house. Maybe I thought I was special. That whatever happened to Eddie and Melissa wouldn't happen to me. Maybe, deep down, I believed Patricia's take. That this was some holy rapture, taking the good to heaven. I wasn't religious much myself nowadays, but I grew up going to church every week and, well, that stuff sticks in your head. Or maybe it was simpler than that. Maybe it was the same reason everyone else was staying around. Maybe it was just a want, no, a need. A deep, primal need to see this through to the end, to get an answer. I passed the elementary school on the way back. The big sign out front with those removable black letters read, "We miss you, Melissa." A cork board near to it had drawings pinned on it, all of her. Her students must have done them. They all had messages similar to the one on the big sign. There were a few students playing outside on the grass. Recess, I guessed. They were playing some version of tag, screaming and hollering. "The hungry spirit's coming for you," the kid who was it yelled. One by one. One by one, gonna get everyone. I shivered a bit. Children could turn anything into games, especially tragedy. Isn't that what Ring Around the Rosie was about, after all? Life went on. We lost some people as the days went by. Sheriff Lowry was one. A few other townspeople too. It became hard to tell who was vanishing and who was just leaving town in the middle of the night. The BIM people abandoned their motel base overnight. They now sat on the outskirts of the town, with tents at first, then a bigger, prefabricated building they got sent in from God knows where. A few of us went to investigate. The owner of the place was one of the ones who ditched town, probably did it that day he got that wad of cash from the black jumpsuit man peeking in through the windows. We found that every room was what you'd expect. Just motel rooms, if a bit messy. Only one room was different. An olive green bag was on the floor. Black boots still lay by the bed. Equipment was on the table. Looked like one of the BIM guys got raptured, must have spooked the others. The BIM guy at the next head count was wearing a full white hazmat suit. Guess they thought it would protect them from whatever was going on. Hell, maybe it would. The black jumpsuit man was also there, though he wore a similar white hazmat this time. "Still think it's them doing it, Jimmy?" a man asked. "Government teleportation? Look at 'em, they're spooked." "It ain't them. I'm telling you, it's aliens." There weren't too many of us left now. Mostly it was Patricia's group. The ones who truly believed those that disappeared were getting taken up to heaven. She was preaching outside now. The town was empty enough that no one really cared. Most others had the sense to leave. Others who stayed were the families of the missing, hoping that the BIM guys might figure something out, might be able to bring them back. A very small handful were fools like me, staying to see this to the end. Black jumpsuit looked at the crowd and cleared his throat. "We just need a few more days," he announced. "We're close to figuring this all out." "We know what's going on," screeched Patricia. A chorus of agreement came from her followers. "It's beyond you, and it's a good thing. It's a beautiful process." Black jumpsuit held his hands up in front of him in defense while still smiling. "Whatever you say, ma'am." He looked at the rest of us. We nodded. A few more days. We'd find out what was going on. Underscore 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 underscore. Patricia would be the last town member taken. She was outside, preaching again one day when that whip crack sound came and she was gone. The crowd stood still for a moment and then erupted into cheers. She got what she wanted, what they all wanted. She had been taken up. The BIM people were there quick. They all wore the full white hazmat suits now. They scanned members of the crowd with their equipment and took their readings. One of the people in the crowd was recording the sermon on their phone. They had captured the whole thing. Before anyone could watch it, though, the phone was taken by one of the BIM people. Her followers decided that they'd have a party in the school auditorium to celebrate her ascension. Food and drinks, movies on the big projector, the whole 9 yards. Even us non-believers went. What else was there to do in town anymore? It sounded like it might be a good time, anyway. Tables were set up in the back with bowls of food and drink. The projection screen was lowered, and images of Patricia were being slideshowed on it, all with text that said things like "Congratulations." No one knows who did it. It had to be someone from the BIM, someone who had a crisis of conscience. We'll never know their name, though. Suddenly the room went dark. There were a few gasps of surprise. Then the projection changed. Instead of the images of Patricia, now it was a white text on a black background that read, "You have been lied to." And then the next slide. "The missing are dead." Some more gasps from the crowd formed that. Somewhere, a woman said bullshit. Deep down, though, some of us knew. And the next slide would convince everyone. It was the cell phone footage of Patricia's rapture. It played normally at first. Preaching, whip crack, gone. But the cell phone had a higher FPS than the old CCTV at Garvey's. The footage played again and slowed as it got closer to the moment, eventually going frame by frame. "Christ," cried a man when we saw it. A child started to cry. A man whose child got raptured broke down, something deep inside breaking in his cries. Most of us were silent in the revelation. In one frame, Patricia was mid-sentence, mouth open, finger pointing. She was in the same pose in the next frame, and it looked normal until you got to her head. It looked as if a scoop had been taken to the right side of her face, the layers displayed like a half-sucked jawbreaker. Skin gave way to meat, meat to bone, bone to brain, brain to nothing. Like something had taken an impossibly smooth bite out of her. And I knew it wasn't possible. It happened to her so fast, it couldn't be. But I could have sworn her mouth had changed slightly. I could have sworn it was curling into a scream now. My mind flashed back. Bad land? Maybe. Hungry spirits, closer. But, God, it felt like the air itself was hungry. We all left town after that. No one spoke a word. I passed the BIM base on the drive out. I locked eyes with black jumpsuit. For once, he wasn't smiling. I think they wanted guinea pigs. Wanted to see how often the thing needed to eat, see if they could control it. Fuck that. I've been out of South Carolina for a while now. I still look, though. I still look at the area. Our little town got taken off the maps recently. Why wouldn't it be? No one lived there anymore. I look at missing people reports though. And people still go missing around there. Abandoned cars found in the middle of the road or careened off the side. Our town was always a drive-through area. Town's off the map, but roads still get used. I hope it's enough. I hope the thing is satisfied. I hope to God it doesn't spread.